Bob Woodward, the assistant managing editor of the investigative unit for the Washington Post and also author of a new book called The Agenda, Inside the Clinton White House. Do the news stories about your book, and there have been many, pick up on the same nuggets of inside information that you thought would be picked up on?
Well, everyone reads this book differently. It is basically all new data about what went on in these meetings, what the role is of all of the players. And some people will write about Greenspan, some people about Hillary, some people about the outside political consultants, others about Clinton's temper tantrum, so you never can tell. Everyone reads it differently.
This is the book, The Agenda, recently out. It's Inside the Clinton White House. Bob Woodward is our guest. The phone lines are open. Go to the phones straight away as we learn more about him and the book. Remember, you can use the numbers on the bottom of your screen to offer your comments or questions. Use the fax number as well. Also, you can reach us through America Online if you're a subscriber or if you have access to the internet to get your comments to him. Some of you have thought ahead, and we've already got some comments from AOL directed to Bob Woodward, and we'll get to those too. What reaction have you gotten from those people who are featured in the book so far?
Bob Rubin, the director of White House economics, really the senior person in the Clinton White House on these issues, appeared on a television show with me last night and said it's all accurate. And I was amazed that they were willing to step up and deal with the reality, warts and all. Normally when I write one of these books going back to the Nixon years, people run for the hills and don't comment or deny things that we now know are true.
You're well known as the one who wrote about Watergate, All the President's Men, Final Days, also the Supreme Court, also the story of Hollywood, John Belushi, and like that. How did you decide that you were going to write this book? You had to decide well in advance, did you not?
I started in early '92 being convinced that after the Cold War was over that the economic issues were really the central issues of values, the central political issues in the country, and did a series for the Post on Bush's economic policy making. Clinton ran in '92 on the pledge to fix the economy, that he was going to use the presidency to do it. And so it was an obvious way to get a window into him and his circle of advisors, at the same time dealing with something that really matters. This affects people's jobs, the state of the economy, interest rates. It really, these are the kitchen table issues for real people.
The news stories plus the serialization in your newspaper, and by the way, today is the last of 4 excerpts that will appear, contain a lot of inside dope, of course. Why do you think these people who still hold their jobs, counseling this president, were so candid with you?
People like to talk, and I had the luxury of spending 18 months working on this. I learned a lot about economics, about the personalities there. I was able to deal with the lower level and the mid-level people and work my way up, obtain diaries and meeting notes, memoranda, and the level of documentation I was able to get was substantial enough that people were willing to talk and add perspective.
Final point before we go to the phones, faxes, and AOL. What ground rules did you set?
Deep background. I don't say who I talked to or who I didn't talk to and where my information came from. Because of the time I was able to spend on it, I was able to coordinate things and make sure that I had them right. Many meetings, I did 20 interviews with 10 or 12 people. Had meeting notes, had memoranda that preceded the meeting or followed the meeting. A number of people in the White House said to me that I know more about this than they do. That's not true, but because I focused all my attention on it and developed a chronology and lots of documentation, I was able to take you there. I've done this for 20 years. And this is as close as you get to a sitting president.
Bob Woodward is the guest. The book, The Agenda Inside the Clinton White House. First call for him, Richardson, Texas. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Woodward, I very much enjoyed all the President's Men, and I look forward to reading the agenda. Last night I was very disappointed not to hear more from you. All day long the Larry King promos had hyped Bob Woodward, yet once begun I had to listen to Robert Rubin, obviously in a campaign mode, giving his list of cheers for President Clinton. I think the White House called in and demanded a filibuster. I find it very frightening that they want to control everything that's said, and I thank God for C-SPAN for assuming that we, the common folk, are intelligent enough to separate the wheat from the chaff and for allowing us true freedom of speech. Thank you.
Well, first of all, you want to have the White House view, and some people thought what Bob Rubin was saying last night was a filibuster. It is his point of view. These are strongly held convictions. He was willing to acknowledge, to my surprise, that I had interviewed him. He said all 36 references to him in the book are accurate, and he said based on his reading of the book, everything is accurate. So we are not disputing the facts in this case. He wants to put a positive spin on what Clinton did with the economy. There are positive aspects to it. There are negative aspects to it, and there's a lot of uncertainty, as Rubin acknowledges and all the people in the White House acknowledge.
This is a picture from the book. That's Robert Rubin on the left of your screen. Who's that sitting next to him?
That's Gene Sperling, his deputy.
And what is Robert Rubin's job in this, at the time of this book?
And this is a new job that Clinton created, very much like the National Security Advisor in Foreign Affairs, coordinating the foreign and defense issues. Rubin is the coordinator of all the economic issues. These are trade issues, these are taxing, spending issues, budget issues, and so forth.
Before we go to the next call, this is the photo on the back of the book, the dust cover. Why did you choose this picture?
It shows Mrs. Clinton whispering in her husband's ear. There is a very detailed portrait of Mrs. Clinton in the book, and in fact the book opens with her, and we know she's a strong woman. We know that she plays a crucial role in his life and in the Clinton administration. What I was able to get was much of the detail where she would appear at meetings and offer views, how she did health care. She's a strategic thinker. Clearly, I would go so far as to say she's a part of Bill Clinton's brain. She is the one who comes to many of these meetings in the White House, listens for a long time, and then says, now here's what we're going to do.
Phoenixville, Pennsylvania next.
Yes, Bruce, thank you very much for C-SPAN. I just wanted to echo the first caller's sentiments about the appearance of Robert Rubin, along with Mr. Woodward. It's a shame that the White House was able to work in a spin master and not allow additional time for him to address the book and your callers as well. It's obvious that he monopolized most of the time, and it was a great personal disappointment to me. And I thank Mr. Woodward for his book. I'm anxious to read it.
Thank you. I'm willing to answer those questions. I don't feel that way. I think it's truly important that the White House be able to state their view. I think in a way it's brave for them to come out and say that this is factual. Often when you write the truth about government, the first reaction is one of denial or avoidance. They are willing to step up and say this is the way it is. Clinton himself yesterday was asked about the book and said, well, I like to have lots of people in and I like to hear lots of views, and kind of that's the way it is. So I would credit them with that.
Mr. Woodward, here's one comment via America Online from Internet. How did you get conned into guesting on the Larry King Hour? I guess that's the program from last night. Any other?
How did I get conned? I mean, it's my job to go out and answer questions about the book, and I am more than happy to sit down with people in the White House or people who have views on these things. I just don't, you don't, maybe to this extent I'm like Clinton, I don't believe in extinguishing debate. I believe in listening to people.
Another comment from AOL. I saw you recently on 60 Minutes. Anyway, I was most impressed and most concerned. The impression left is that we have a president in the White House who has a short fuse, a chaotic administration, and much to prove between now and the next election. In light of Mr. Clinton's recent saber-rattling vis-a-vis North Korea, in light of his need for more, quote, military experience, unquote, are you worried? Did you hear anything about North Korea during your research?
Well, I focus entirely on the domestic and economic issues here. But as one of my friends who read the book said, economics is the excuse. What emerges is you see how Clinton manages and conducts the presidency. I did not ask about North Korea or do any of the foreign policy issues. People have speculated, and I say this is speculation and this is others, that if this is the way he manages the things he really cares about, how does he manage these foreign and defense issues?
Riverside, California next.
Yes, my question is the incident with Bob Kerrey, how has that affected their relationship, or was there a relationship to affect?
And what was the incident?
Well, I describe, and one of the things I enjoyed in doing this book, you see all the dimensions of the White House, not just inside, but there is a lengthy series of interchanges between Bob Kerrey, the senator from Nebraska, who was the last vote Clinton had to get to pass his 5-year economic plan. And they exchanged some pretty heavy words, and in fact, at one point, Clinton got so frustrated he used the F word. And Kerry has now said publicly that, in fact, that happened. Kerry and Clinton were rivals for the Democratic nomination in '92. They have always had an immensely complicated relationship, and I attempt to lay it out and take you to those meetings and the discussions, and so you get to see how Clinton really operates with somebody that he has, I think, basically ambivalent feelings about, and how Kerry really got hosed down by the president, but at the same time other people worked on Kerry, and Kerry finally decided to provide the last vote for the plan. So in a sense, the abuse worked.
Here's a fax from Boulder, Colorado. It's lengthy. Let's see how much of it we can get through. She wants you to comment on her conclusions from your book. One, although management was scarce, it appears there were two distinct forces at work, political and economic. Two, Clinton's ideals were investment and putting people first, which Begala and Carville acknowledged were not in the plan. Three, the economic team in Congress reduced Clinton's ideals and changed the agenda to deficit reduction because of pressures of Congress, spending caps, and Perot's influence.
Well, that's an astute reader. Is the reader identified?
Yes.
Yeah, because I guess maybe you don't identify names.
Well, we do from time to time. Susan Sarah is her name.
Yeah, but she read it very carefully, and that's one of the dimensions of the book. That Clinton ran as a populist Democrat, obviously. When he confronted, as he has said, the new deficit numbers, what Clinton called the mess left by Reagan and Bush, he also got an education in what you really can do and not do when you are president, and there are limits on it. And he had to reduce the deficit to get the long-term interest rates down, which affect mortgages and consumer credit. And one of the things I think the book shows, not only Clinton's level of engagement and his temper, but he's a very smart man. And last spring he ranted and raved in private to his aides that he and they had become the Eisenhower Republicans, that their program was deficit reduction, free trade, trying to help the bond market, and what about the investments for real people? What about the middle-class tax cut? And he was quite upset, and at one point later on told people privately that his plan was a turkey.
She also asks, will he handle health care in the same way?
Well, Newsweek, in writing an account of the book, posed that question, which is a fair one. Is this what we're in store for on health care? And it is a fair question. I write a good deal about health care and Mrs. Clinton's involvement in heading the task force and the ups and downs and the inevitable, or maybe not necessarily inevitable, but the health care plan was delayed repeatedly again and again. That's one of the question marks, and maybe that's a book somebody else can do.
Champaign, Illinois next.
Good morning.
I'm Latino, and I was wondering how are Pena and Cisneros doing in the White House?
By the way, are they in this book?
They are not. What I focused on the kind of economic issues that are not specifically related to housing or transportation, and so I really do not know. I think by many accounts, though, they're doing quite well as cabinet officers.
This from Marina Del Rey, California. Was it deja vu all over again talking to Gergen? In parentheses, he asked. He was Deep Throat, wasn't he?
David Gergen, who works in the Clinton White House, who had been a previous senior White House aide in the Nixon, Ford, and Reagan administrations. I don't say who I talked to in this book at all, and so I'm not going to address that question. I will address the question, the allegation of whether Clinton, or whether, not, excuse me, whether Gergen was Deep Throat in Watergate, and he was not. I've said that many times. It just does. It doesn't parse at all. He did not know any of the things that the source Deep Throat knew.
Taylorville, Illinois, next. You're on the air. Taylorville, Illinois. Go ahead, please. We lost him. I'll go to this fax. During last night's Larry King Live, speaking on behalf of the Clinton administration, Mr. Rubin repeatedly took full credit for the current economic boomlet, even though economic figures from '92 show that recovery was underway a year before Bush left office. In fact, was not the fourth quarter of Bush's last year in office shown to have had a 4% plus rate of growth? Why did you let him repeat these mistruths?
That is a very, again, somebody who's very smart, and the recovery was underway at the end of '92. I wanted to let him have his say. The economy is better, is more stable. At least it was so in '93. I think there's a big question mark about where it goes in '94. I did not want to get into an argument about numbers with Rubin. I think people who saw what he was saying realized exactly what it was. But whoever faxed that in is exactly right and asks the right question.
Another fax from Luverne, Minnesota. You have interviewed staff from several administrations. What truth, if any, is there to the claims that the Clinton staff are somehow not up to the job due to youth, inexperience, attitude, etc.?
I have such a layered portrait in this book of the staff, the cabinet, the people closest to Clinton. And people are going to draw very, very different conclusions. Number of people have read it and said, for instance, Lloyd Bentsen, the Treasury Secretary, comes off as the hero of the book, the gray-haired eminence who goes to Clinton at one point after he finally passes his economic plan and really lays it on the line like I've never heard of a cabinet officer laying it on the line with the president and saying, Mr. President, you've got to delegate more. It's the quality of your decisions that matter, not the quantity. I sit next to you, this is Bentsen talking to Clinton, I sit next to you at meetings and you're tired, you fog over, you're gone.
What do you say?
You think you can't, you think you can go without sleep. You can't. And Clinton then almost mournfully said to Bentsen, I know you're right, Lloyd. Things got better for a while, but they didn't change.
Orange County, California is next.
Well, there he seems to go again. I don't know. I watched you last night on Larry King Live, and I just wanted to say that I think that you're being a bit irresponsible in your reporting. When you claim that Robert Rubin said that what you were saying was accurate, what you didn't point out this morning is that while the words might be accurate, the tone and the tenor of the way it was said is you're skewing it all so that you can sell books. You know, I think it was very appropriate for Robert Rubin to be on that show to defend.
I agree with you,
the White House. And I do have a quick question. Isn't it true, Mr. Woodward, that you can be in a room? One person can make a comment in a room full of 10 people, and all 10 people are going to have a little different spin on what that person said. We all hear things differently, and you're reporting it so you can sell books. That's the most important thing for you, is to sell books.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I agree with the caller that people can have different views, and that's why I did or attempted to talk to all 10 people in the room. Reuben was arguing about nuance sometimes, and it makes your point that people are going to see a different coloration to what went on. But I was able to talk to people. I mean, at one point during that discussion, Reuben turned to me and said, well, you probably know the date. He and so many other people have acknowledged that I did as much reporting as you possibly can on these things. As I say in the introduction, the book is scrupulously reported. I gave everyone an opportunity to offer their views. I included all perspectives in it. Is the book definitive? Is it total? Obviously not. No book can be. Any work of a journalist or an author is not an engineer's drawing, as I say, of those events, of those conversations. But I've talked to people who were there since the book has come out, and they said not only is it right, in fact, but it's eerie. You got the tone. It's like being there.
I should mention to our audience that we have invited some person from the White House here to be on this program to offer their perspective on Mr. Woodward's book, and we're still waiting to get a acceptance. And of course, when we do, we'll let you know as soon as we get it. Getting a lot of stuff in here on this, a lot of interest in it. Here's a fax.
Well, people are interested. I mean, it's not about my book. People are interested in Clinton. If I may, because I think this goes to the core of what I'm trying to do and other people writing about Clinton. He's a very complicated figure. I report how George Stephanopoulos, probably one of Clinton's closest aides, says to colleagues, Clinton is a kaleidoscope. Everyone sees something different. That Clinton is capable of feeling contradictory things at different times. And so people in the country are asking, who is this person who is president? People who work with him closely ask the question, what does he really stand for? What direction is he trying to take the country? And people have serious questions about this, and it's right that they should.
This fax from San Antonio. When you and David Broder decided to save Dan Quayle's neck by writing that shameless puff piece a couple of years ago, were you already planning to get, in quotes, Bill Clinton? I have your book. I have all your books. And I must say it doesn't read as harshly as your words spoken on various stops on the book tour. Are you hyping it for sales? Because I wasn't surprised or deterred by the so-called, by that I mean, quote, revelations.
As I say, many people read the book very, very differently. I'm not saying anything that's not in the book, and I'm sticking to the facts that now the White House itself has said are accurate. In terms of Quayle, when David Broder and I spent 6 months doing a series for the paper on Dan Quayle, a lot of people looked at it as some sort of political statement. There were very harsh things about Quayle in that series. Quayle, in his recent book, writes about the series and says he sat down and reread it, and it's not something he would want his family or friends to read. Again, the journalist is somebody who goes and tries to absorb what happened. Like the caller said, and it's a good point, people look at it differently, and people can read this book, and people have read it, like one of the writers for Newsweek saying it's a blistering account. Columnist the other day in the Post said, you come away liking Bill Clinton.
Pascagoula, Mississippi, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to make a statement and then ask a question. The statement is Clinton gave 2 magazine interviews. One was July 92 issue of Business Week. He quoted the deficit was larger than what he found it. Why do you reporters keep allowing him to lie about this? Thank you.
I'm sorry, the last part of that, why do...
Look, I think she was referring to early on in the administration, between election and inauguration,
Yeah.
Bill Clinton realized that the deficit was going to be larger than it was, and I think her question is, well, why you allow him to get away with that sort of thing?
Well, I report exactly what the numbers were, and I report the attitude within the Clinton circle, which was they're trying to get elected in '92, and all their attention is in that direction. And there's some people quoted in the book saying who are in the administration, feeling that Clinton was not very straightforward about it and knew the deficit problem. Now, I lay out both perspectives there, but it was one of the ingredients in Clinton's decision to come up with the economic plan he did.
Here's a fax from Indianapolis. If you were a North Korean general and read the composite assessment you've penned of Clinton's decision-making skills, would you feel more confident in launching a successful attack on South Korea? Is your book a constructive critique to make at this time?
Well, the job of the journalist is to describe what happened as best he or she can. The truth, I think, is always constructive, and this is carefully done, and if some North Korean general reads it and draws a conclusion, that's fine. A number of people who have read the book say that this is kind of a midterm report card kind of book. Here normally comes out years after a president leaves office, and there is a lot of promise in the Clinton presidency. There are a lot of problems in the Clinton presidency, and probably the most important reader of this are the people who are there, because in a way it's the ultimate management consultant's report. I don't carry any political bias. I don't criticize or praise anyone in the book. I just attempt to describe what happened.
We've got a quarter hour left with Bob Woodward. I noticed in the introduction or the preface that you said that all of your notes are going to be made available. Tell that story.
Well, I decided, people have asked me for years what I'm doing with my files going back to the Watergate coverage. And I have them all, and I decided that I would donate all the Watergate files for books on the Supreme Court, the CIA, the Pentagon, in this book on the Clinton White House, to Yale University, but they would not be opened for 40 years. Which is a time when all of the people would either be gone or in retirement, and I've received no objections from anyone.
When will those papers be delivered?
A lawyer and the university are working that out now.
Silver Spring, Maryland, next. You're on the air.
Yes, Mr. Woodward, I would like to ask you really what is your reason for writing this book? Is it not to try to bring President Clinton down?
No, it's not. It's go ahead.
Caller. Go
ahead. Yes. It seems to me that it's at a time that you really, when everyone else is bashing, trying to do everything they can to hurt President Clinton. And I think you are doing the same thing to help the Republicans.
All right, ma'am. Thank you.
The answer is this is not designed to help or hurt anyone. It's to describe what goes on. And this is really an important element in this, that as a reporter, you look at government, you look at concentrations of power, and there's no more greater concentration of power than in the presidency. And Vietnam and Watergate and lots of things have demonstrated that writers and reporters need to be very aggressive in looking at how power is used. And that's all this is an attempt to do.
Oakland, California is on the air.
Thank you. I agree that reporters do need to investigate and present facts, but there really is a bias in tone in the media these days. And indeed, even though I have not read your book, in your opening statement to say that at some point Clinton had a temper tantrum, I would have no doubt that in private the man sometimes must get angry because he is bashed. I feel the same about even Reagan and Bush. I'm not a partisan person either, and I believe it really is a great loss in our government these days that a part of our government is now the media and the way that people are communicated to. We're human beings. We hear the tone. We hear the insinuations. We hear the disrespect. And that is detrimental to our country. I wouldn't mind reading that he got angry, angrier than maybe he normally shows because he's under so much control all the time while being constantly insulted and assaulted. And it seems to me a very difficult thing, and that the media does have to take more responsibility.
Okay, that's a thoughtful comment, and I would agree that sometimes, maybe very often, the media is unfair to Clinton. I am not unfair to him, and I'm very respectful, but is probing, and I attempt to get as close to the bone as possible in this. You have to look at the alternative from the point of view of a writer and a reporter, and that is it better not to know? And the answer in a democracy is simple. It is better to know. And when you start on one of these inquiries, you don't know where it's going to go. And I vividly am prisoner of my own experience in Watergate. When the burglary occurred at the Watergate, everyone said, well, what is this? The White House said it's a third-rate burglary. It was a sock, a little thread on a sock that we were able to pull on. And look what it led to. It led to a kind of criminality and abuse of power in the Nixon White House that had never been seen before. So in a democracy, it's better to know. And people like Clinton, who has been kicked around and criticized, and people have said things about him, I think would read this and maybe not like it all, and not like it that it's laid out that he had one of these purple fits or went into a rage in the reaction of some of the people around him. But he's a big boy, and he knows that it's carefully done and that it's fair. And so I with some thought, but without any real hesitation, continue doing this kind of work.
You speak as if you know that he's read it.
I sent a copy out there to Europe before, about a day or two before it came, and I would suspect that he reads books a lot, but maybe not, and I may be wrong.
This from America Online. Mr. Woodward, it seems that the Pentagon is aware of the chaos you report and has declined the opportunity to participate in at least 2 administration-conceived adventures recently. If true, it would be unprecedented in modern times. Does your investigation suggest that the administration still has full control of the military?
I mean, I, again, didn't look at the military or the foreign policy aspects of this, but I've never heard any suggestion that they don't have control of the military.
Back to the phones. Fluorescent, Missouri. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. Woodward, it's a pleasure talking to you. I think what your book really points out is this is a very difficult country.
Ooh, I'm sorry, we lost him. That's my fault. I apologize for that.
I think what he was saying is that it shows that it's difficult to be president, and I think that is one very fair reading of this book.
Who emerges, if anybody, as a surprise to you in terms of a White House personality who isn't otherwise well known to the public?
Well, I think that in a way in a large way there is lots of new information about Clinton, about Vice President Gore and his environmental persistence and his willingness to give Clinton frank advice. There's a full portrait of Hillary Clinton and exactly what she does at specific times, of the outside consultants, of Stephanopoulos and David Gergen, of the White House chief Mac McLarty, and then the economic team.
What do you say about Mac McLarty, as long as... you mentioned?
Well, a lot of people in the White House expressing, and I think the information shows that he's not a real chief of staff. He doesn't have the authority. He's not an organizational center. He is a truly decent, well-liked, if not loved man, but he's not what John Sununu or Jim Baker did in the Reagan White House. He's not somebody who coordinates things.
Jacksonville, North Carolina, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just have a question concerning Hillary Clinton. Two of your statements, one, you state that she offers her views, yet in the next sentence you state she listens to what people have to say and then says, here's what we're going to do. I was just curious why I didn't more strongly address why she has this incredible power in the White House, yet she was never officially elected. And this is as close to being unconstitutional as I've ever seen in the government.
Well, maybe I didn't make it clear, and I believe the book does. She offers her views, but doesn't make decisions, as best I can tell. And her views more have to do with what's the strategy for selling this? What's the strategy for organizing it? What's the strategy for getting their act together? What's the plan? And so that's why I say in their crucial time she is often the de facto chief of staff, the organizational center. She's a person who Lloyd Bentsen, the Treasury Secretary, tells colleagues that Hillary Clinton is a lot tougher, more disciplined, more organized than her husband. And she's the one, when things get too messy, says, hey, wait a minute, we got to get going here, and we have to talk to each other, and we have to set up a direction. And there's a very crucial, dramatic, long scene in the solarium, which is a little room atop the White House where they met before 4th of July last year, when they had no communications plan, when they had not made some of the essential decisions on the economic plan. And she gave a withering critique of their failure to have a strategy and insisted that they establish a war room. She had established one for health care, which she turned over to the economic team to get this plan sold.
Some of the commentary about the book is that she is a co-president. Do you accept that commentary?
A co-president would mean a co-decider. She does not decide. Now, I say honestly, I think in the modern world, spouses serve this kind of function in lots of marriages, where they maybe don't decide. My wife will say to me, look, why did you say that nonsense, or why do you do this? She will be very direct and frank with me, and I'm sure if that were printed in somebody's book or in a newspaper article, we would be jolted. But I would say, yes, that's the role of a wife. I found no occasion or evidence where Hillary Clinton was usurping authority, where she was deciding, where she was pushing an agenda beyond the health care responsibility which she's been publicly assigned.
Got a couple more minutes. This fax and some more phone calls, I hope. Is the phrase, quote, not in the room, unquote, in reference to the First Lady's inputs, a sort of code, meaning she made her positions known before the policy meetings that she did not attend?
Not that I know of.
You didn't intend that?
No.
Next call, Danville, California. Go ahead.
Morning, Mr. Woodward. I have two questions for you. The first one is, can you shed any additional light on the White House's views of the situation surrounding Mr. Rostenkowski? The second question is, much has been made by enemies of the president and by the press of alleged liaisons involving Mr. Clinton in Little Rock and elsewhere. Is there any possibility in your estimation that such liaisons, if they in fact ever took place in Little Rock, could possibly continue in the White House?
On both the Rostenkowski matter and the Clinton personal life matter, that's not what this book is about, and I did no real reporting on it, and I don't have any knowledge beyond what I've read in the controversy in the press about it.
Bob Woodward, of the Washington Post and author of this book, The Agenda, Inside the Clinton White House. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. We're going to continue with Bob Woodward just a few more minutes. We're anticipating live coverage of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. It's not quite ready to go, and I think, Mr. Woodward, you'll be able to stick with us just a few more minutes. I think we can show you that the room isn't quite ready to go, but we do have Crofton, Maryland on the line for Bob Woodward. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I'm a first-time caller. First of all, thank you, CSPN, for this opportunity. And also, Bob, thank you very much for being a credible reporter through all the years. My question is, the Vice President Gore, he's the person who's accountable to the President. Where does he fit into all this? Is he giving reassurance to the President? Is he giving support or commentary? Thank you.
Gore's role, based on, and I spent a good deal of time looking at his role in the Clinton inner circle, is stronger than I think has been reported. He's willing to go to the President and say, you have to get with your own goddamn program, as he did at one point here. The method that Clinton used to select Gore as his running mate in '92 makes sense. And a number of people in private pushed Clinton after, why did you pick Gore? And Clinton said to one of them, because I might die, that's why. And that meant that he felt Gore was the person who had the experience and the focus and the stature to assume the presidency should something happen to Clinton. And ultimately, if you look at it, that's the test that should be made.
We are going to probably jump away here almost any minute. We're awaiting the coverage of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and they're going to be talking about our policy toward Haiti. We'll expect testimony from former Congressman William Gray, now Special Advisor to the President on Haiti, and Frederick Smith, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. And I'm going to try to squeeze in a few things. Bob Woodward, what is your next project?
I have not decided.
You pretty much get to choose. You can look at the world and choose anything, can't you?
Well, no. I mean, I've talked to my bosses at the Post and publisher and editor at Simon & Schuster. And but this is picked, quite frankly, because it's at the center of the quality of life that people are going to have in the future. If we have a good, stable, growing economy, that affects tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in this country, and in fact affects the entire world. So this is the good, this is the effort to measure what matters.
Glenmont, New York is next. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Mr. Woodward, this is the 90s. He used the F word, and no one else in those rooms ever used the F word? I mean, give me a break here.
Well, I guess, caller, you don't think that's news. Is that right?
No. I mean,